Hi guys, Kate here. I'm going to read chapters 3 and 4 today. Tendai went out to the garden where he found Rita and Kuda trying to rouse the Mellower. The man was lying on a couch under a jacaranda tree. From the layer of purple petals that had drifted over him, it was clear he had been there a while. "Come on, Mellower," urged Rita. "Unlock the pantry so I can reprogram it." "Let's tip over the couch," suggested Kuda. The little boy tried to lift the legs, but the couch was too heavy. "Father's gone," Tendai said. Who had an idea about what motivated the Mellower? The man opened one eye. "And Mother too?" he added. The praise singer sat up and stretched. "What a wonderful day," he cried. "Just look at that blue sky. Don't the jacaranda flowers make a magnificent carpet on the green grass?" "Come on. I have to reprogram the pantry before it starts cooking." Rita grasped one of the Mellower's hands, and Kuda took the other. Together they pulled him to the kitchen, where a large control panel sat behind a locked glass door. The Mellower pressed his thumb to the lock, which hummed as it considered his print. It chimed, and the door slid into the wall. "Hurrah!" yelled Kuda as Rita began to assess the pantry. Tendai knew, as eldest brother, that he ought to object, but he was still in a grim mood about what he had heard in the library. It wasn't often they were left alone. As long as either father or mother were home, no matter how inaccessible, the Mellower wouldn't dare interfere with the day's activities. Of course, being the Mellower, he often did so by accident. "What's for lunch?" inquired Kuda. Rita called up the memory: soy burgers, stewed parsnips, and brown rice. "Ew." "Any suggestions?" "Sausages and potato chips," cried Kuda. "Scones, jam and whipped cream." "Ice cream and chocolate sauce," cried the Mellower. "Chicken with that crispy batter and fried shrimp, and that cheesecake Aunt Farai made." Rita typed busily. "Shouldn't we have vegetables?" said Tendai. "A tomato for Tendai," finished Rita. "There." She stood back, watching the pantry whir and click. In a few minutes, a delicious smell wafted out of the food compartment as plates were filled. The Mellower threw open the kitchen windows. The air conditioner began to whine in protest. Rita turned it off. A warm breeze, laden with the scent of freshly cut grass, replaced the house air. Not that anything was wrong with the house air. All the pollen, dust, and pollution was filtered out, with artificial perfume added to cover up a rather flat smell. The house air was okay, but wild air was more interesting. Whenever Mother and Father were away, the children opened the windows. Kuda tossed his chicken bones onto the floor, which sent the butler and maid robots scurrying to retrieve them. The mellower talked so much, ice cream melted off his spoon and ran down his shirt. He told them about Great Zimbabwe, the ancient ruined city to the south, and of Monomatapa, who founded the Shona Empire. As the man talked, Tendai imagined the ancient king. When Monomatapa traveled, his royal guard went before him with battle axes and heavy-bladed hunting spears. Then came a ceremonial drum carried on a pole between two men. It was beaten continuously as they walked. The king rode on a litter surrounded by praise singers, musicians, and dancers. Here comes the Lord of the sun and moon, the lion that prowls by night. They sang to the sound of hand pianos, iron bells, and the shell anklets of the dancers. Red dust rose up around them, sending a plume into the air to alert people the king was approaching. Behind the musicians walked women bearing Monomatapa's household needs, courtiers who carried his furniture, and more soldiers. Whenever the sound of the king's drum was heard, villagers threw down their tools and ran out to salute him. When he desired to eat, a ceremonial stool was placed in a clearing. His women approached him on their knees with food, and all the others waited in a ring to hear his good words and repeat them to the waiting crowds behind. I wish I were a king, sighed Kuda. Well, I wouldn't have liked to live then, Rita snapped. Imagine creeping up to someone on your knees. How can you tell it so well? It's like we were really there. Tendai, for a moment, had actually been in the clearing, listening to the shrill, welcoming cries of the women. I have a shave for storytelling, the mellower explained. Tendai nodded. A shave was a wandering spirit who entered you and taught you a special skill. It didn't matter that the mellower was of the English tribe, and the shave was obviously Shona. You didn't have a choice about who possessed you. When a spirit wanted you, he or she generally got his or her way. If you resisted, the spirit made you sick. Rita now clearly showed that her great-grandmother, a gifted mathematician, had decided to pass on her skills. Great-grandmother was a Mudzimu, or family spirit. It wasn't surprising when a departed family member bestowed her blessing on a descendant. Shaves were more unusual, but no means rare. When someone died without a descendant or proper burial rites, he or she turned into a shave and wandered until a willing host was found. Kuda was too young to be possessed. Tendai was certain some warlike ancestor would be delighted with his little brother when he was older. But what about me, he thought. He didn't have any special skills. quite a lot of dull, ordinary people weren't ever possessed by anybody. They weren't worth it, Tendai sighed. You forgot to eat your tomato, said Rita. I don't want it. I do, Kuda cried, and he hurled the tomato straight at the butler robot. It burst across the machine's dark blue uniform. Kuda! Yelled Rita. Food fight! Food fight! Kuda shouted. He threw a fistful of potato chips at her. Rita immediately slopped ice cream onto his hair. Kuda armed himself with the remaining chicken bones. Not fair. I don't have any ammunition, cried Rita. The mellower handed her the sugar bowl. The sugar did very well because it stuck to the ice cream. Next came raspberry jam, a cup of tea, and the milk jug. The mellower joined in, throwing chocolate sauce and dodging chicken bones. The floor and walls of the kitchen were splattered. Rita, Kuda, and the mellower dashed around, knocking over chairs, spitting on the wet floor, and banging into the distraught robots who were trying to clean up. Come on, shouted Kuda to Tendai. No thanks. You're a wimp. Tendai withdrew to a corner. He watched with irritation as the others turned the room upside down. Finally, they collapsed into a heap, panting with exhaustion. Oh, gasped Rita. That was fun. The automatic mop came out of its cubbyhole to repair the damage. One plate broken? Not too bad, said Kuda. I'll tell Mother it was too hot. It slipped out of my hands. Rita lay in a puddle of milk, which the automatic mop tried to reach. You'll have to change your clothes, Tendai said. Who cares? That's what washing machines are for. Wasting food is bad. Think of all the poor people in Harare. Oh, I give up, cried Rita. We never have any fun, and you have to sit there like an old vulture and preach. Go croak somewhere else. Croak, croak, said Kuda. Tendai's right, the mellower said mournfully. I'm supposed to set an example. Your father will throw me into the street when he finds out. I'll starve. Oh, woe is me. There now. You made him cry. Rita brought the praise singer a paper towel to blow his nose on. Don't worry. We'll protect you. I'll program the pantry to say we ate those ghastly parsnips. The house robots won't tell on you. They don't know how. The mellower sniffed his thanks and immediately cheered up. They all went to change clothes, except Tendai, who didn't need to. Later, they played Monopoly, climbed trees, swam in the pool, and took turns tormenting the automatic Doberman. I'm so bored, said Rita, lying in the shade of the wall. Tendai, Kuda, and the mellower lounged nearby. The afternoon heat was great, and the air vibrated around the electrified razor wire overhead. Did you ask Father about the scout trip? No, said Tendai. Told you so, Kuda said. Well, maybe you wouldn't be so sarcastic if you had to do it yourself, cried Tendai, suddenly angry. Maybe you don't know what it's like being yelled at every time you open your mouth. He's nice to you. You're just a baby. Wait till you have to stick your neck out. I am not a baby, yelled Kuda. You are so. You still take naps. I'm not. Kuda landed on Tendai and pounded him with his little fists. Oh, stop it, said Rita wearily. Tendai held Kuda at arm's length. It wasn't difficult, and let him swing his fists uselessly until he burst into tears of frustration. I understand, said the mellower quietly. What? Tendai turned his attention to the praise singer. Kuda sat on the ground with tears streaking his dusty face. I know what it's like to be yelled at every time I open my mouth. It's horrible. Tendai felt uncomfortable. Adults weren't supposed to tell you their problems. What is this trip you keep talking about? Asked the mellower. I need an explorer's badge to become an Eagle Scout, Tendai explained. Some people walk through a game park, that's best. But Father would never agree to it. I can get one by traveling across the city, though. So can I, said Rita, and they said I could come. Kuda put in quickly. Wait. Does this mean you'd walk across Herrera? That's over 50 miles. The mellower sat up and brushed grass clippings from his hair. They settled on his shirt again and were forgotten. We can take buses. We go to the terminal at Mibera, Musica. Catch a shuttle to the mile-high McElwain Hotel and go on to Patrice at the far end of the city. Then we come back, explained Tendai. We've been saving our allowances for months, Rita said. Tendai has a pocket knife to kill enemies, said Kuda. Be quiet, Rita smacked him. Let me think. The children watched anxiously as the mellower idly chewed a grass stem and stared into the distance. You'd leave in the morning and be back before dinner? Yes, said Rita. You wouldn't talk to strangers or go on side trips? Of course not, Tendai said. Well, the man lay back with his head pillowed on a heap of cut grass. The automatic lawnmower whirred unhappily from where Rita had tied it to a tree. I happen to know both your parents are leaving early tomorrow and won't be back till dark. Really? Said Rita. But we have to have permission, Tendai put in. I'm not going behind Father's back. Rita started to argue, but the mellower held up his hand. If I asked him, he'll give permission. I don't understand, said Tendai, who had never seen the praise singer do anything except cower in front of Father. If I did it during praise, the man added. Then Tendai understood. He remembered the sleepy, foolish feeling he had had after praise. The mellower intended to hypnotize Father. That's dishonest. No, it isn't, cried Rita. He'll give his permission. Who cares how it's done? Oh, don't you see? This is the only way we'll ever get out. Do you want to grow a beard before you learn how to ride a bus? Please, Kuda said, looking up at his big brother. It was Tendai's turn to stare into the distance and think. What would it be like to go outside the way everyone else did and fly all alone without bodyguards or the police or Father to a magical place none of them had seen before? As he thought, the warm, excited feeling he had had that morning returned. His ancestors waited in the shadows of the walled garden. One of them raised the hollowed horn of a kudu bull to his lips and blew to give courage to the hunters. "Wake up, you're dwelling again," said Rita. Tendai shook himself. "Let's do it," he said. The rest of the day passed rapidly. Rita wanted to program the computer to say they'd already done the homework, and Tendai firmly told her no. Grumbling, she applied herself to memorizing the anatomy of a frog. Kuda practiced his writing. Tendai studied algebra, a subject he found soothing. You always knew when you had the right answer in math. Tendai, Rita, and Kuda were as perfect as they could manage the next morning. Rita even held in her stomach for the time it took Father to inspect them. Breakfast passed without mishaps. "I'm afraid you're on your own today," Mother said as the dishes were cleared away. "I've promised to entertain a delegation from China. Your father has a meeting with the president and will have dinner with her tonight. I'm sorry you can't come." "That's all right," Rita said cheerfully. "Let's see. I programmed the pantry. The floor was sticky next to the door. Do you know anything about that? The automatic mop must be running out of soap. I'll check it." Rita gave Mother a wide-eyed, innocent look. "Well, I don't have time to check it myself. Should we skip the Mellower this morning, Amadeus?" Father glanced at the ancestor clock. Tendai, Rita, and Kuda sat with their hands clasped tightly below the tablecloth. "We have 45 minutes, he rumbled. He nodded at the butler robot, who wheeled down the hall to find the praise singer. "Isn't that typical?" thought Tendai. "The one morning when it matters, he's late, as usual." The ancestor clock chimed the quarter hour. After a time, it was probably only 5 minutes. The Mellower appeared at the door, bowing, apologizing, and calling himself a bad boy. If he forgot the time, he probably forgot about the permission too, Tendai thought. And indeed, the first part of the praise was no different from the way it was any other morning. It changed, however, after Father and Mother had fallen under its spell. Tendai felt guilty. We wouldn't have to do this if they weren't so hard to reason with, he thought. Gradually, subtly, the Mellower drew Father's attention to his duty to pass courage on to his children, and how better than an exercise in self-reliance. Father nodded, with his eyes half closed. Tendai watched the praise singer produce a letter giving them permission to go on the scout trip. Father signed it. The Mellower obtained 2 pass cards for the gate, one for the departure and another for when they returned. He even talked Father out of money for bus fare. All this happened without a break in rhythm. The poetry flowed on. The praise threw its shining coils around both parents. Tendai was amazed. Finally, it wound down and seemed to fade away into the magic realm from which it came. Mother stretched her arms and said, The ancestors' clock chimed the hour. "Maui, we're late," cried Father. The stretch limo hummed on the antigraph pad. How long had it been ready? Tendai wondered. Father and Mother both ran out the door, with Mother pausing an instant to give them a quick smile. The limo took off at once. The house was theirs, and the pass cards, permission slip, and money lay on the table. The mellower sat in Father's chair, with his feet on the tablecloth. Tendai was vaguely shocked. "No push-ups for you," shouted Kuda, dancing around. "I'm glad you're on our side," Rita said, folding her napkin and placing it neatly on the table. "Well, don't sit there dawdling, Tendai. Let's make a break for it." "Do you want me to pin the money inside your pocket?" said the mellower. "No," Tendai said. "Silly me. Of course you're too old for that." "All of you are too old, even Kuda." Tendai looked at his little brother, who was dressed in his best shorts and shirt. He had had a steak knife stuck in his belt until Rita took it away. "I don't think Kuda should come," Tendai said slowly. "You promised," shouted Kuda. "I know, but parts of the city aren't safe." "A scout keeps his word. You promised." "You can't go on a scout trip if you haven't joined," Tendai said. "I'll be a cub next year. I'm just as brave as you." "Tell him, mellower." You're a little lion." The mellower picked up Kuda and swung him around. Kuda roared fiercely. Around and around they went, with Rita shrieking encouragement. The praise singer collapsed on the rug with Kuda and Rita on top. "More, more!" yelled the little boy. Tendai felt his heart sink. It was hopeless to expect the mellower to back him up. He always said what people wanted to hear. "You'll have to do everything I say," Tendai told his brother. "Yes, sir," said Kuda, in perfect imitation of one of Father's soldiers. The mellower puffed with exhaustion as he picked himself up from the rug. "All present and accounted for, sir," Rita shouted, standing at attention. "Kit bag inspected. Map, compass, rations, all in order. Violin, troops." She marched around the room, swinging her arms. Tendai knew the situation had gotten out of control. "All right," he sighed. "The routes marked on the map?" "We'll go to Mimber Musica first. Rita, keep an eye on Kuda. I think he should stay home, but it's only for a few hours." He shouldered his backpack. Sunlight filled the orderly garden with its trimmed walks and hedges. Tendai found himself looking at each detail as they left. "I hope Father doesn't remember what he did during praise," he thought. "The mellower says he won't, but who knows?" The praise singer slid the pass card into the date slot. He pressed the hold button on the weapons detector so Tendai could take his scout knife out with him. It was a wonderful knife with a gold-washed blade and red dragons curled around the handle. Father had brought it to him from China. "You're going to have a wonderful time," called the mellower. Tendai looked back at him, framed in the gate. For 1 second he wanted to run back to the safety of the walled garden, but then the praise singer closed the opening. They were alone. The wind ruffled the shadow of trees on the sidewalk. "We're on our own," said Tendai as he led Rita and Kuda up the steps to the bus stop. Chapter 4. Mother lightened the window of the stretch limo and looked down on the city beneath. Mount Hampton passed on their right, glittering with solar panels to catch the energy of the sun. "That's a nice place to live," she thought. Still, it was hard to find fault with Mazo, and their crime rate was certainly low. Not that anyone with half a brain would bother General Maxika. She smiled fondly at her husband. "What was it?" the mellower said. "The general was a great tree whose branches protected them, or something like that." The mellower certainly knew how to put things. She was lucky to have a live-in praise singer. Amadeus was suspicious at first. He thought compliments were for sissies. But he changed his mind after the first few sessions. The limo changed directions and headed for the university. The Chinese delegation was suffering from rocket lag and wouldn't show up for another hour. She had time for a leisurely cup of tea. Mother sighed with contentment. Now they were passing over the gray ruin of Dead Man's Valley. Mother looked regretfully at the ancient mountains of garbage. What a shame so much land went to waste in the middle of the city. But what could one do? It had been contaminated with toxic chemicals over a century ago. They said people lived in Dead Man's Valley. Not nice people. Not people she'd invite for tea in Mazo. Mother wondered idly what the children were up to. They were so restless in the hot weather. Tendai kept nagging about a scout trip. Wait a minute, thought Mother. Something happened during the mellower session this morning. It was odd how difficult it was to remember what the men said. It was pleasant, of course. She could listen all day, but often she couldn't remember why she felt happy. The scout trip. Something about the scout trip. She looked over at Amadeus and saw him frown as though he too were trying to remember. In her mind's eye, Mother saw 2 cards on the dining room table. Amadeus had placed them there. They were Marie. Past cards. Father and Mother looked up at each other at the same time. "Curse that mellower," shouted Father. "Turn this limo at once." The chauffeur flew a figure 8 as he reacted to the general's furious voice. Then he straightened out and made a beeline for Mazo. The general sent a message on the limo's computer to seal the gates of his house. Tendai, Rita, and Kuda fought their way down the steps of the bus stop. "Hold on," shouted Tendai over the noise of the crowd. Kuda clung to Rita and she grabbed Tendai's hand so hard he winced. "I never saw so many people," Rita cried. "Ow! That woman just stepped on my foot." Tendai grimly led them through the mob. People struggled past them with bags of groceries, balanced on their heads. A trussed-up chicken stuck its head out of a sack and watched them mournfully as it was carried past. "It's like being squeezed in a toothpaste tube," gasped Rita. At last, they reached the bottom and made their way to an empty area under a platform. It was shady, but foul, with rotting vegetables and debris from the meat market. A huge rat considered them with its flat, black eyes before bending again to gnaw on a bone. "A rat!" cried Rita in delight. "I've never seen one outside a book. Do you think it's tame?" "Don't touch it," yelled Tendai, slapping her hand. "You bully! How dare you hit me? That's not a tame animal. Look at the marks it's making on that bone." The rat continued scrunching bits of sinew and meat. It lifted its muzzle and chittered at them. "He thinks you want his dinner," said Tendai. "Very funny." Rita threw a chunk of bread from her backpack at the animal. It gobbled it up and waited for more. "See, it is tame." She threw another chunk. The rat finished this and waited. When no more food came, it walked deliberately toward her. Tendai tried to pull her back, but Rita stubbornly held her ground. The rat suddenly leaped for her shoe and scrabbled its paws on her leg as it squealed with rage. "Help!" shrieked Rita, kicking wildly. Tendai swung his backpack and caught the animal by surprise. It spun around on the cement and bumped into a pillar. At once it sprang up and hurled itself at Rita, but Tendai struck it again. The rat clung to the backpack. He swung it against the wall, knocking the animal senseless. It flopped onto a mass of cabbage leaves. He didn't know whether it was dead or merely stunned, and he didn't care. He dragged Rita and Kuda back to the noisy crowd before anything worse happened. They found another pocket of calm behind a chili bite stall. Rita was trembling with shock. "Animals aren't supposed to do that," she wailed. "It was tame. I fed it." "We aren't used to wild creatures," said Tendai. "Rita's a wimp," said Kuda. "Don't you start. If you had a big rat on your foot, you'd wet your pants." "I'd kill it with a scout knife." Tendai ignored him. Kuda, in spite of his brave words, hung on to Rita's hand as though he were welded to her. "Look, you can get a badge for observing wild animals," Tendai told his sister. Rita lifted her tear-streaked face. "We've only been gone a few minutes and already you have a badge. Think how many you'll have at the end of the day. Would you like a chili bite?" She wiped her eyes. The heavy smell of fried dough filled the space behind the stall. She murmured. "Look at your pack," said Kuda. Tendai saw the horror that a chunk had been ripped out by the rat's teeth. A damp patch had to be urine. "I'll wash it in the public restroom," he sighed. "Come on, we all need to cheer up." They went to the front of the stall, where a man tended a pot of boiling oil. Trays of greasy chili bites cooled on mats of newspaper. "Could we watch you make some?" asked Tendai. "Sure," the man said. "How many do you want?" "Lots," said Rita. So Tendai ordered 2 dozen. The man spooned blobs of batter into the pot of oil, where they hissed and bubbled with a satisfying roar. He turned them with a slotted spoon. The chili bites were filled with onions and shreds of hot peppers. The smell was maddening. The man dumped them on a newspaper-covered tray. "That's my table under the tree," he said as he accepted. Tendai's money. "Bring the tray back when you're finished." They sat in the shade, devouring the hot fried dough. Their faces gleamed with oil, and the chilies brought tears to their eyes. "This is living," said Rita. "Let's get something to drink." Tendai brought them cups of freshly squeezed pineapple juice. They lazed under the tree, feeling slightly sick but satisfied. Tendai rinsed his pack under the chili bite vendor's faucet. The huge market of Mimber Musica no longer seemed threatening. It hummed with laughter and shouts like a big party. Buses took off from the central depot, going to all points of the city, going farther to Mozambique and Kenya, and even Gondwana in the north. Long sunshades covered the various markets. Each street was devoted to a different product: fruit, vegetables, clothes, crockery, and soap. Meat sellers slapped sides of beef to dislodge flies and show off their wares. Ngangas squatted before heaps of roots and herbs. They wore feathered caps, banded with wildcat fur, and smoked long pipes as they dozed in the heat. There were even a few public mellowers. Each praise singer had his own booth with a comfortable couch. When someone felt depressed and needed a quick praise, he gave the mellower a brief rundown of his best points. The person would lie down on the couch while the praise singer created a poem about them. Tendai, Rita, and Kuda watched as closely as they dared. The poems started out in the standard way, but once the mellower got going, he added the desired compliments. It didn't matter, Tendai thought, whether the praise was true or not. Once the listener fell under the spell, he accepted it all as his due. Pot-bellied men were praised for their lean, hard muscles. Skinny, bitter-looking women were told how plump and kind they were. And the extraordinary thing was that people began to look like their descriptions, for a few minutes at least. "This is boring," said Rita. "Can't we do something else?" "He's not as good as our mellower," Kuda said. Tendai led them along the rows of fruit and vegetables. The sun was climbing. They had been at the Mimber Musica at least an hour. They would have to leave soon if they were going to get to Patrice and back before dark. But Tendai found he didn't want to go. Mimber Musica was so full of life. He realized he was happy, and he hadn't known he was sad before. He liked the noise and the smells, both good and bad, and the faces, both innocent and crafty. He liked being surrounded by people. He liked them in all their shapes and dispositions, simply because they were people and not machines. "Look!" cried Kuda. They were walking along the animal pens. Vendors haggled over goats and chickens. Fancy show cats yawned contemptuously at the crowds that milled around them. But on the table at the end, all by itself, sat a most amazing creature. It was blue. Its fur stood out in a handsome ruff around its face, and its tail hung down almost to the ground. It wore a leather collar attached to a chain. Its owner, who had a surprising number of bandages on various parts of his body, sat glumly in a chair and smoked a cigarette. "That's a genetically engineered monkey," said Tendai in wonder. "I thought they were illegal," Rita said. "They are." The blue monkey reached out a long arm and snatched the cigarette from its owner's mouth. The man tried to retrieve it, but the monkey bared its teeth at him. It calmly began to puff on the cigarette itself. "What are you staring at, Roach-Face?" it snarled. "It talks?" Rita cried. "Of course I do. When I have someone worth talking to." "Not him." The blue monkey spat in the direction of its owner. Two other men had stopped at the table. One of them flicked a peanut at the animal. "When I want a peanut, I'll go to the market and buy one," shouted the monkey in a rage. "Get me a hamburger, you tightwads." The men laughed. Tendai noticed, out of the corner of his eye, that one was burly, like a prize fighter, while the other one was slender and somehow unpleasant. But he was far too interested in the animal to pay much attention. "I thought genetically engineered monkeys were illegal," he said. "They are now," said the owner, "but you can hardly kill off the ones already made." "Not that you haven't tried," the monkey said bitterly. "Look at this wheel he feeds me. Black bananas they can't sell in the market." "Go on. You eat better than I do." "Lies! Lies!" shrieked the monkey. "I earn all the money and he drinks it away. He passes out in the gutter every night, and I have to fight the rats off of him." "You poor thing," cried Rita. "You said it, sweetheart. I'm the unhappiest creature alive. Too bright for my cousins in the bush. Too bright for this lump of donkey doo-doo. Why don't you buy me, sugar? You look like a nice kid." "Oh, Tendai, could we?" said Rita. Tendai thought about how Father would react to the foul-mouthed animal, or for that matter, Mother, with her tasteful tea parties. It was almost worth it. "Please," Kuda said excitedly. "He can stay in the garden." "Yeah, the garden," said the monkey, fixing Tendai with its bright, intelligent eyes. If they'd got the monkey, they would have to go straight home. Tendai couldn't see they're taking it all over the city. "I'm housebroken. I play the harmonica. I'm a barrel of laughs. Come into the back so we can talk business." The animal tugged at Tendai's sleeve. He allowed himself to be pulled behind a wall. while the owner followed with a hangdog look. Rita and Cuda danced along with the blue monkey. They found themselves in a dimly lit area like the place Rita encountered the rat. "Wait, why can't we talk about this outside?" said Tendai, but instantly the monkey sank its teeth into its hand. Rita and Cuda screamed as the two men who had silently followed behind pounced on them and stuffed rags into their faces. Tendai struggled with the monkey, but the owner threw his arm around Tendai's throat and plastered a rag to his face too. His lungs burned and his legs turned to jelly. Chloroform, he thought as the pain faded and he fell to the garbage on the ground. Alright, that was the end of chapter 4. I'll be back again tomorrow with chapters 5 and 6. Hope y'all have a great day. Bye!